Well, if you've been following my channel for any length of time, you've certainly heard me say that the first year as a nomad is the hardest, and it does get easier. And the reason I say that is because once you've been through a year, you've been through 4 seasons, you've got some things figured out, you've got your system dialed in, so it does get easier as you go. But at the same time, there's always change, whether that change is rapid or slow. The things do change, and that requires us to change as well. And it's been said that the only constant is change. I'm sure you've heard that expression. Sometimes that change is welcome. Sometimes it's not so welcome. Right now, we're in a period where there seems to be a lot of rapid change, and some of it is definitely impacting nomads and lifestyle travelers. Well, as nomads, it's kind of interesting that some change has little impact. So when rents are up, going on average more than 20% across the country, which is staggering. I cannot even imagine dealing with that situation. But when rents are up like that across the country, that doesn't impact us full-time nomads, full-time travelers, because we're not paying rent every month. So things like that don't really impact us directly. But as nomads, we do live close to the margins. And so there are other things where they hit us, and they can hit us particularly hard when these changes occur. So one of the things we've seen over the last year or more is an increase in fees at RV parks and campgrounds. They're going up. That's really the closest us nomads come to paying rent. And some never do that, some do it a lot. But if you are paying RV park fees or campground fees, you've probably seen them going up at the same time that it's harder and harder to get available sites for occupancy too. The pandemic, especially the first year of it, prompted a whole lot of closures, public land closures, campground closures, RV closures, or RV park closures, and that affected a lot of nomads. That did not really have an impact on me. One part, I'm fortunate that my kids and grandkids, for the most part, live in a state where it was not heavily impacted by the pandemic. It's probably one of the least impacted of the states here in the U.S. But beyond that, I strategically and intentionally put myself in places where, as a nomad, I could do that. I put myself in places where the pandemic was not having as big of an impact as in other places. So that impacted a lot of people, though, with all the closures and everything. Fuel costs, we're seeing that right now. Gas Buddy just put up an article yesterday on March 3rd. San Francisco has become the first city in the nation to reach $5 a gallon average for gas. I know we're all used to California gas being expensive. I've seen gas well over $5 plenty of times in California, but they were in smaller towns. And apparently San Francisco is usually not quite that high. But this follows October 2021 news, so just a few months ago, when San Francisco broke its all-time high of $4.73 per gallon for regular unleaded. It's been climbing ever since. According to numbers today, March 4th, from AAA, the U.S. national average is $3.83.7 per gallon for regular. That is up 11 cents a gallon since yesterday, the national average. The national average for premium fuel, which is what I have to run in my van to make it happy, and also to I get better mileage, better fuel efficiency, so it's kind of a break even. But the national average for premium today is $4.38.2 per gallon. Prices are expected to continue rising for the foreseeable future. This is impacting everybody, but it definitely impacts those of us who are nomads and who travel full time, because we sort of can't avoid moving around a bit. Then there's vehicle shortages and prices. I mean, they can't make new cars fast enough. They had this whole slowdown and shutdowns with the pandemic. Now there are supply shortages of chips and other things, and they can't make new vehicles fast enough. So as a result, new vehicle prices are up, but used vehicle prices are up by staggering amounts. I'm browsing some recently, and I'm seeing 5-year-old trucks with 100,000 miles that are going for more than $40,000, and it's just crazy. Any of you that have been looking at used vehicles know about this already. Well, it's been nearly impossible to find vans, especially full-size vans, for some time now, a couple of years anyways, 3 years, maybe 4 years. It's been getting increasingly difficult. even minivans are getting hard to find, but full-size vans that are especially in decent condition, you can't find them. Prices on all vehicles are staggeringly expensive. Vans and box trucks in particular, that's things I watch. Pickup trucks, they're often at least double what they were a year or two ago, if you can find them, which is a whole other challenge. Something gets listed for sale and it's gone instantly. And this also is expected to continue for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, we have food costs rising and other consumables and things. Federal government statistics I was just looking at this morning for January was that there was more than 7% inflation in at-home grocery costs year over year. I think it's 7.4%, and I think it's only gotten worse since then. So what's the point of all this? It's not just to rehash bad news or frustrating, scary, distressing news. These changes are impacting everyone, but there are some unique challenges for nomads when this kind of thing is going on, when these kind of rapid, widespread changes are occurring. Some nomads are financially secure and comfortable, and that's a wonderful thing to be in that situation. Some of us are still working age and we're still working, so, I definitely am feeling it, but I'm not on a fixed income either. But there are many people who are nomads, who have become nomads in whole or in part due to financial necessity. They might be on Social Security or disability. They're not working. They're on a fixed income. Or they just have nowhere near enough income to go around. And boy, that's when prices go up like this, when you're on that limited of an income, that's really scary. If you're barely getting by on, I know a lot of people who are nomads these days are trying to live on $800 or $1,000 a month, maybe less. You're living in a vehicle. Things like fuel and grocery prices skyrocketing is a immediate crisis. You can't stockpile food as a hedge against inflation when you live in a van, or especially a minivan or a car or something. One of the reasons I made the decision to get the trailer last summer was to have more capacity to stockpile, paper towels and food and things like that after the pandemic when there were so many shortages. As a nomad, you have to drive and you likely have to migrate due to weather, because it's just too hot or too cold, unless you're in like San Diego or maybe a handful of other places with a really moderate year-round climate. Most of the country's way too hot in the summer or way too cold in the winter, or maybe both. So you kind of have to migrate to handle living in a vehicle. So I'm just wondering at this point how nomads are going to adjust to these widespread changes, as they seem to strike at the very heart of this lifestyle. Will people travel less due to the high cost of fuel, especially those with larger rigs? I'm kind of in the middle on that. If I'm not towing the trailer, I'm kind of in the middle on fuel efficiency, and it's impacting me already. I know that. I'm wondering what, if any, social implications there will be if people cannot travel as normal. If you're not able to travel to visit friends and family like you normally do, because first we had the pandemic and all the concerns with that. Now we have staggering fuel costs and other inflationary pressures like food and vehicle costs. It's a good chance that a lot of people are not going to be able to travel as much as normal, I think. What happens when a vehicle is destroyed in a crash or mechanically fails, but the price to replace it is twice or more what it should be? Anytime I drive, I'm aware of that these days. With a van, I carry full coverage with the insurance on it, but there's just no way I'd be able to replace that thing for what the insurance company's going to pay me, and I'd either have to come up with a whole lot of money beyond that to get the same equivalent vehicle probably, or I'd have to buy a whole lot less vehicle for the value of what the van is. Well, I'll share some of my thoughts here about how these changes are affecting me, but I also want to hear from you in the comments about your take on this. We'll talk first about the travel trailer. I bought that last summer to have more comfort and convenience, and it has achieved that, but it requires twice the fuel to travel with it. So I go from 18 miles a gallon on average open roads to 10 miles a gallon or less. I had one tank coming back up to Wyoming. I was at 6 miles a gallon because of wind and hills, but normally it's around 10 miles a gallon, so it's like 9 miles a gallon, so it's about half what I normally get, which means twice the fuel costs, even without prices going up. And also what I've run into is that the van is just not powerful enough for hauling the trailer over distances. It does fine on flat roads, and I am well within specs. I carefully researched this. the van is well below its weight capacity. The trailer is well below the capacity of the van for trailering. The combined vehicle weight is about a full ton below what Ford specs it at. My frontage area on the trailer is well below what Ford specs that the van can tow. So I mean, I'm well below on every metric you want to look at, and it does just fine on flat roads. If I get long grays or if I get a rough wind that's not a tailwind, any other direction, the trailer is like a sail, and the van's just not powerful enough. So I am not going to haul the trailer again. I'll haul it down to town to the dump station because it's only a few miles, but I'm not doing any trips with the trailer again while I'm driving the van because it's just not powerful enough, and I don't want to blow up the engine and or cause other premature wear. And obviously the fuel thing is a significant consideration as well. I had hoped to upgrade to a more appropriate tow vehicle this year, and even when I bought it, even though I knew I was well within specs for the van, I figured this year I'd upgrade to a truck, or like a 3/4 ton truck that had a little more towing capacity just to make it easier and everything. But that's just not going to happen with the used vehicle market being like it is. So the trailer will be home base in Wyoming for the duration, and the reasons for that are directly a result of the crazy changes that are happening with used vehicle prices and fuel costs. So any and all travel that I end up doing for now is going to be done only in a van, whether that's day trips or, go explore and do photos and videos, or whether it's regional trips, or whether it's just to get out and get in the mountains and camp or whatever. Even if I'm heading back down south or something, it's going to be done just in the van until things settle down because it's too crazy right now. And so these changes limit my ability to travel as I would like due to fuel costs. So just this week I took a trip up to the mountains, enjoyed some time out in nature after getting real cabin fever after hanging out in the trailer and in houses for the entire month of February. And it cost me nearly $100 in fuel just to do a day trip up to the mountains. Tentatively planning a trip out to the Northeast, to New York and Massachusetts. I have family out there that I need to see. Haven't seen in a good while, some of them more than a year now. And I've done this trip many, many times, sometimes several times a year. Well, I'm looking at, right now, as of today's fuel costs, an absolute minimum of $1,100 round trip in fuel. Not counting tolls, and that does not include fuel if I want to do any detours to see things. That's just literally driving straight there and straight back. I'm looking at a minimum of $1,100 in fuel. When I checked it last week, it was like $1,000 in fuel. But prices have gone up so much just in the past week that it's added 10% to that. And they're talking about prices continuing to rise for the foreseeable future. We don't know exactly how high they'll get, but I'm looking at even more expenses as time goes on. So I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that trip just because of the ridiculous cost of fuel. And of course, there's things like food. I'm having to shift to less expensive foods, being more careful about what I buy, more selective, eating less, which is not a bad thing. But, it's definitely impacting even things as basic as what I eat. So the bottom line, these changes that I've been talking about here that have been developing so rapidly are forcing me to reconsider how I live this lifestyle. Everything from food to travel to the vehicle setup and having to leave the trailer parked and stuff. So I'm definitely feeling it, and I'm definitely spending some time considering, okay, how do I adjust to this? How do I make these changes? One of the things I'm working on right now is trying to get the van. It's sort of set up as a camper van still, but a little bit primitive. I still have the fridge and the solar and electric and everything in there and a bed, but is not really ideal for doing any longer trips in. So I'm working on getting that reset up. I was just at Home Depot the other day, and while lumber and building materials have come down from their peak during the pandemic, it is still staggeringly expensive. So even that, I need to do some things in there, but it's going to be done as the price of things is going to impact what I do and how I do things to keep the cost down as reasonable as possible. So what about you? How have these changes affected you as a nomad? Or if you're not a nomad yet, how have these changes affected your plans for travel? I don't have any easy answers, but perhaps we can learn from each other's experiences anyways. Well, thanks for joining for this video, everybody. Again, leave me a comment, let you know what you think about all this craziness going on these days, and we'll catch you in the next video.